Hey guys. So before we really get into what the live campaign has been up to, let's talk about the forum campaign really quickly. Now, they actually haven't done much, and a lot of that is my fault. I have this problem where I'm really, really tired because I'm recording like right now, for example, and working on ruminations and whatnot, basically constantly, and then I have spare time, and I'm like, ugh. So I pull up the forum and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna GM, and my mind just goes blank, and I'm like, here's what's happened so far, though. Rory, Hegaide, and Javan have headed south into the show territories in order to try and save the humans. Now, I'm not really sure what their long term plan is there. I'm not sure, even in character, that they're thinking long term. They're just trying to get the humans away from whoever they believe is trying to take advantage of them. As an aside, it is worth noting for our viewers that I have left it deliberately ambiguous as the GM as to whether the humans are being taken advantage of or not. Now, all the party members absolutely believe they are, and that's totally their right. But I leave this for your determination if they are or not. Here's the information they know. The humans en masse, I'm talking about all 4 point whatever million, I figured out the exact number at one point. Humans have been offered passage and basically a job working down in the south, and so there's been this huge mass exodus, and large trawlers and large ships have been sending all these people south, and then those people have been heading towards this specific plantation where they're then being picked up by a freaking airship, a huge super transport airship. We're talking like this thing actually dwarfs most military grade frigates. Of course, it's just a transport. I'll talk about that in a moment. And so they have gone down there. There's been some altercations. Rory should have killed someone. I was going to talk about that, but I decided not to. Basically, it boils down to the fact that Rory absolutely nailed this guy. And I've had a rule for a long time that if you do, and apparently this is actually a rule in one of the editions of D&D, I don't know, but if you do damage equal to a certain amount over the total health of an individual, it doesn't matter if it's subdual or not, you just freaking kill them at that point. And that's been a rule I've used forever. I mean, since second edition, I believe, is when I first started using that rule, because it just makes sense to me. At a certain point in time, you're so strong and you're doing so much damage that subdual. The original reason I implemented that rule was it felt like subdual was just a cheat. It was like, okay, I'm just going to take you, hostage. I'm just going to wail on you as hard as I possibly can and do subdual damage, and it'll be fine. But after a while, I've kept that rule because it makes sense to me in lore that at a certain level of strength, you are a colossus trying to interact with an ant, and at a certain point, it's just going to be difficult to not kill that ant, no matter how hard you try. Makes sense. So this level 1 guy with 3 HP absolutely gets destroyed. And Rory and I actually had a bit of an argument about this, and basically I let it go to please him. I still would agree with my standing. I actually consulted with other GMs, and they agreed with me as well. The guy should have died. But rather than having him die, I decided to have him be permanently disfigured. His lower jaw is actually gone. Just gone. It's destroyed. And so Rory gets into this fight. This is a human, by the way. Basically, and make this clear, by the way, I'm not blaming Rory the player for this. All of this makes sense in character. I just think the guy should have died. It was perfect for where Rory the character's arc was going, and as I already explained, it made a lot of sense. But Rory was kind of on edge, and he's kind of upset about this whole humans thing, and he's worried and he's scared. And then this human comes up and starts talking smack to him because he's got an attitude and he's rather upset himself. So he starts pushing back when Rory pushes him. So Rory pushes literally jaw gone, and I mean just jaw gone. And of course, he falls over unconscious because there's now a gaping hole where his lower mouth used to be. The other human who's with him, Rory tries to intimidate into talking. That fails miserably because his friend's jaw is gone. Again, just not trying to be obstinate towards Rory the player, just this makes sense. Hegaide basically fails at talking Rory down, but the two of them flee the scene. Hegaide gives some medical aid to ensure that the guy lives, which is the only reason the guy is still alive. He does, however, commit suicide later on because he's missing his lower jaw. So the party reconvenes and they're like, okay, we need to try a different approach. So they decide to head to this one place and they find Sethos. They actually go interact with Sethos. Now, for those of you who don't remember, Sethos was actually a party member back in the day. I have been continuing him forward as an NPC, as I do with all such characters who don't die. Like poor Ashikel actually ended up dying as part of a scene that happened up north. He was at ground zero when the two airships detonated. So Rory and Hagaide and Javan go interact with Sethos. Sethos seems pretty on the level, but he's acting just a little bit suspiciously, and the party picks up on this, of course. They head to the next plantation. There's all this stuff that's going on, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, it gets to the point where everything comes out in the open, and Sethos basically starts accusing them of some of the stuff they've done, including the assault on the human most recently. But that's just one of the things that's brought up. And after a bit, they threateningly approach Sethos, which triggers the local guards to come out and try to attack them. And now, of course, my people who've been watching the campaign already know who these creatures are, so I can tell you directly. A sentinel comes out. One of the Vioshan sentinels comes out and stomps in and just starts laying into them diplomatically. He doesn't use force. He is trying to convince them that they should come peacefully and quietly. Now, I did this deliberately. The Vioshan said, the Sentinel says, he's a red stripe, by the way. At least I think he was red. He might have been a black stripe. He should be a red stripe, though. Anyways, he says, if you come with us, the humans will not be harmed. Now, that sounds like a threat, as you may or may not be aware that it wasn't. It was actually just him promising, the humans, as in all the humans, will not... or I'm saying this wrong, excuse me. What they assumed was he meant all the humans that they have hostage will not be harmed. What he meant was Rory and Hagaide will not be harmed. That was actually the intent of that message, but of course I phrased it wrong deliberately. The players started fighting him, big fight. They get a little injured. Javan nearly died. They kept calling Javan an abomination because he actually is. So I guess that's technically right. And the Vioshan, and his hand is left behind. They're not actually sure what happened to him. He may have emergency teleported out. He may be dead. They're not really sure. Lord knows that there's some interesting situations going on there. But regardless, they decide to flee the scene of the crime just in time for the Sclavi troops to come in and try to figure out what the hell's going on here. They manage to convince Sethos that they are themselves. And they don't get him on their side, but they get him to the point where he's not willing to turn them in. And so Javan goes into a stasis cell, and Rory manages to convince... So what happens is they lie in wait for that super transport to come in and pick up the latest shipment of humans, right? So it comes in, lands, big airship, huge thing, bigger than several football stadiums. Not the football field, the football stadium. Huge thing comes in, and they all sneak aboard. Rory manages to sneak the food on board, which is the crate containing Javan, and they are, as of right now, in the airship heading to interact with whatever happens at the end of that, and that's kind of the point I've kind of stalled at. Meanwhile, Coulson... Oh, actually, real quick, just to describe this, the airship's actually quite luxurious, relatively speaking. It's got, dozens and dozens and dozens and hundreds of rooms in it for the people in it. It's obviously designed just to be a transport for personnel, like a I don't know the equivalent, like a luxury liner, I guess. And, it's got a big feeding hall, lots of good food there. There's some entertainment rooms, there's all sorts of stuff to do. And it's a lot more pleasant than you might otherwise think. And it also apparently was built very recently, like within the last month or so, this airship was built, which is just ludicrous on the face of it. So that's probably a lie. Then we cut to Coulson and Zeiss, who have been building the Empire. They have finally gotten in contact with the High Queen Alyssa. Now, Alyssa was someone who hasn't really had a lot of presence in the campaign, and that's on purpose because several years ago, when the Lords took power in Alluvia, she kind of went off the radar. She just kind of stepped back and stopped interacting with the world. Very recently, she has come back into the fray, and she has one of the Hollows with her, which is the minions of the 11. And it is specifically a Terebrus. In other words, a high-end combat model. Probably there as a bodyguard. This thing has been with her, and they take notice of that because they've got their spy network thing. And they're doing all sorts of other things. Zeiss is trying to make this like super luxurious inn called the Black Butterfly, I think. I hope I'm getting the name right. He's also making the Shadow Depository. If you've seen Farscape, you know what that is. If you haven't seen Farscape, go watch Farscape. It's a great show. But basically, it's like the Super Vault. This is not exactly a new concept. There's actually some stuff in D&D like this too, in Faerun, excuse me, specifically, and Dragonlance, I think. But it's like a mega vault, which is designed to house the really, really rare stuff that the super rich and the super powerful just don't want anyone getting access to. And so Zeiss has been working on building that. Coulson's been assisting. All sorts of money and time and effort has been pushed into that. It won't even be done for a while, at least if they want it done right. They were offered a boon from, I believe it was Tabron? I'm trying to remember which organization offered them the boon. They said no, regardless. They said, nope, screw off, and so the facility will be taking the normal amount of time to build. And they were attempted to be courted by a group that they believe to be the Directorate, and they believe the Directorate is trying to sow discontent and basically like open doors to enable the conquest of Holtberg to be smoother and simpler. So they said, yes, we'll totally go along with this. Not that long after this, they met with the Queen. That's where I'm leading up to. And in so meeting, they discover that she is... Well, they're not really sure of the relationship, but she is in some way working alongside the 11. They're not sure if she's their leader, or if she's their subservient, or if she is actually a member of them. She was deliberately vague and did not answer that. She basically just said, I speak for the 11, and that's all the information that she felt they needed. She has been rather hardball with them. She doesn't trust them at all, and finds that she has no reason to trust them at all. However, she has been diplomatic, and been willing to work alongside them if they're willing to play ball in return as well. And so they've kind of worked back and forth. They have decided to work now as triple agents rather than double agents. So they are working with her to subvert the group that they believe is the Directorate, who is going to be attacking Holtberg. So they're basically feeding misinformation and preparing to betray whoever that group is. Furthermore, she has decided to... basically help provide support and information on a lot of things. They're really pushing for this Mary Lascelles expedition, which is about frickin' time someone finally goes to one of the Lascelles to figure out what's what. I'm curious what they're going to think of when they find what they find there. And then Zeiss and Coulson both kept coming up with ideas for how to deal with the Lords, who are the ones in power right now, and the ones insisting on the war. And no matter what they came up with, nothing really seems to be something that would satisfy them. The Lords have power now, and, as far as they're aware, are winning the war. So there's no real, there's no recourse here. There's nothing they can offer them, because they already have it. So Zeiss has been having, and Coulson have been having a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out how to negotiate with that. He even offered a political marriage, to which the High Queen said, in as insulted of a tone as I could manage, no. The funny thing was Zeiss kept pushing it, so they kind of lost a few brownie points with her on that one. For the political marriage idea. She did reveal that she has been married, and in some time ago, she's been married for a very long time, which is actually a plot point, which is the only reason I even mention it. The final thing, though, to note, and this is where they're ending up, is they have decided to do something I've been waiting for the players to do for a long time. And I've actually talked about this before, because this is a very strange and difficult thing to deal with. So, as a DM, you always want things to have a certain level of threat, but I feel like my hands are tied when I can't kill the players. Now, I don't mean that, obviously I don't want to kill the players, but at the same time, the fact that I can't kill the players means it's very difficult to make things challenging. I don't want them to just breeze through everything like they have cheats on. I want them to overcome struggles. I want them to be challenged, and that means threatening them and hurting them. The characters, not the players. And so I found it's very, very difficult. I've talked about this before. It's very, very difficult to do that when you cannot kill your players, player characters. So I'm in a weird situation because they've decided to go to the Tumarok, the one in the Dry Reach Zone. Now, if you happen to not know what that means, the invasion of the mainland by the Tumarok is one of the largest and most wide-scale and most important events of this entire history, of this entire setting. The Tumarok swept in, absolutely annihilated everyone in a gargantuan swath of territory, and then just took it and then stopped one day. And nobody has any frickin' clue. Most people don't know what a Tumarok looks like. In fact, I'm pretty sure none of the party... none of the party knows what a Tumarok looks like either. In lore, in character. They're just a complete alien... occasional attempts have been made by merchants, by explorers, by people who accidentally going there, by military invasions to penetrate the Dry Reach Zone. all have universally failed. The number of people that have managed to escape one of those attempts to incur and actually gotten back out are very small. I actually spent some time discussing a story about that with one of the Black Brine, where one of their member had actually managed to get off the ship and survive the ship being absolutely annihilated from an enemy they couldn't even see. So, Coulson himself has also done some time on the line, which is the line in between it's imaginary line, but it's might as well be a literal line in between the Alluvian and the Alluvian territory and the Dry Reach Zone. And he discovered that they have some kind of ridiculous artillery. It's far enough away that they can't scan or sense it or whatever, and they have basically only seconds to interact with it. He did some tests with it to try and figure out how it works, but the long and the short of it was there's no getting in there. Any distractions that he managed to come up with, and he did come up with a few clever strategies there, so props to the player. But anything that came up with there was always a temporary gain. It basically allowed you to go in for seconds, like penetrate the zone for seconds, and then you had to get right back out or die. So that's where the players Coulson and Zeiss are going. Now the funny thing is, as a GM, if we're going to just instantly die when they get in there, I would say no. Again, because I'm not that kind of GM. I'm not that kind of a dick. It's like someone who doesn't know what a black hole is saying, I want to pilot my ship into that black hole. My response would be no. I'm not going to let you just abstractly kill yourself out of ignorance. However, certain things have changed very recently in the campaign that means they won't be killed instantly in the Tomb Rock in the Dry Reach Zone. I hope they won't be killed long term, but honestly, I really feel like I'm just in a weird place because they should probably die. That's where they're paused, is entering the Dry Reach Zone. We'll see how that goes. So let's talk about the live campaign, now that we've caught you a little bit up on the forum campaign. So Snarg, as you're aware, has been having a voice in his head and a woman and making appearance another who identifies herself as Vasmora, or excuse me, of House Vasmora. She's not Vasmora herself, and she has been giving information periodically. You know, the information with regards to the assassin in Danby's, the information that there was actually she's given several information. There was also the woman who initiated the assassination in Danby's, which they never actually followed up on. And then there was the information that there was someone who was trying to disrupt the meeting between the Directorate and the Vyotians. And she gave them information regarding one of the Directorate generals because Snarg wanted to assassinate that general. That's in the future, though. So the point being, so there's this woman, and for some reason, Zariel just doesn't seem to trust a voice in Snarg's head. Now, I've actually reasoned out logically why this voice is only in Snarg's head, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not going to go into that right here. But suffice to say, it is for a lore reason. You know, there's a purpose to it. It's not just me picking on Third or whatever. This voice in his head, however, the two have been very antagonistic. In fact, the players have been trying to discuss how to keep the party together because the characters, in basically every way, should probably have split up by this point in time. I do have one hard rule when it comes to my games that I GM, regardless of the system, you know. It doesn't matter what this is. You keep the party together. I don't mean splitting the party. I mean, you can't choose to go off and do a solo adventure for the rest of the campaign because you don't agree with the party. That's the one rule that I don't violate. You are a part of the party. The party stays together. You may split up temporarily, but you always get back together again and go forward, right? That's the one hard rule I have. And they know this, and I've made this very clear. Some players have tried to violate this in the past. Many players have actually tried to violate this in the past. I was actually initially inclined to say no when Rory and Hagade and Javan wanted to split the party yet again, because it's like, ugh. But you know, I acquiesced on that because I get where they're going, and I do have an end goal of them in mind. It's just they're not there yet. Hint: Zariel already knows about them. So regardless, they've been having trouble with that, and we have kind of a solution in the works as of my real life now time, which I think is like 4 or 5 episodes ahead of where you are, so we'll get to that later. But in character, there's a lot of friction, is what I'm trying to say. Guido has been trying to play Peacekeeper, but Zariel and Snarg are almost at the point of being at blows over this Vasmora issue. Guido, meanwhile, has been formalizing his trade ties. His trade organization is getting a lot stronger. He is getting a lot better, in a lot better position, and he is actually now working alongside a new organization, which I'll talk about in a minute, in order to try and expand his trade number. He even came to me, the player came to me and was like, here's the general route, very general terms, because I don't want this to turn into bureaucracy simulator 755. But he's kind of giving me an idea of here's how the trade route's going to go, and it's going to go up here like this, and we get goods and whatnot here, which takes to here, which we get goods or services here, which we sell, and we take the money here to get goods, and repeat. It's very logical. It fits in the lore, and it's perfect. So that's actually awesome. Furthermore, this new organization, I swear I'm going to talk about in a moment, has wanted to hire the Blood Fox as one of their special ops forces, like just a long-term contract, in other words, not actually formally working with the new organization, but rather trying to be on purview for a long time. Now, I keep hinting at this new organization, so let's just go ahead and get it out there. The Directorate and the Viosians have joined forces. And a lot of this is because of the players, because of what's happened in the Osteth Republic, because of what's happened with regard to the War in Alluvia, which was also partially instigated by the party, and partially because of the fact that Zerial has been trying very, very hard to move these groups together. Remember, the party's actually been working with the Directorate for some time, and Zerial actually got on good with the Viosians relatively recently, which also led to Guido and Snarg getting along good with the Viosians. So the overall, the party has been coordinating with these groups for some time now. So the Viosians and the Directorate have now merged into one mega organization, which is so this is a reminder for those of you not really been following this stuff so far. The Directorate is basically consisted of a bunch of Dericost and lycanthropes who are running a fully military organization consisted of a huge number of the militaries of the the 3 nations. There's a very small number of the Directorate in the Osteth, but the vast majority were members from Sho, from Alluvia, and from Nevere. And so that's what the Directorate is, and they're the ones who invaded Stonehold all the way back in the day, for reasons that still have not been discussed, because nobody's actually gone up there still. The Viosians, actually still, even to this day, people still don't know a lot about who and the why and the wherefores of the Viosians. However, as I've already intimated, the giant sentinels, the metallic creatures with their unique embossing and different gems and different inglasses. Every sentinel looks unique is what I'm trying to say. And they all have stripes which indicate what kind of something they are. Rank or social status, no one's actually sure. Zerial believes only the red stripes can talk, for example, but that's not actually true. Those are the Viosians, and they've had their fingers in every pot for forever. They're basically the ultra spy network. And so we have the military of most of the nations of the world merged with the spy network, which has giant metal golems. This new organization is called the Dominion. Now, so the party obviously is in good situation with the Dominion, sort of. Over the course of the last few episodes, that's sort of shifted a bit. Oh, excuse me. But the Dominion are the ones who want to hire the Blood Fox, and the Dominion are the ones who are trading with Guido, and the Dominion are the ones who are trying to basically have the party join them. And in exchange, they will give boons and resources and infrastructure and all the kind of political backing the party lacks to the party. The Dominion hasn't really given a lot of its goals yet, nor have they really done a lot of movement yet, because even though it's been like 4 episodes since everything I'm discussing right now, it's actually only been 3 days in lore. Actually, I think it might be less than that. It's been a very brief period of time. So the Dominion is still restructuring, and news is still getting out to the many, many, many agents and many, many soldiers and whatnot of this new change in policy and structure. So, also, as a result of this, a Dericost... So the party had a choice between a Sentinel and a Dericost to join them, basically, and be stationed on the Maiden's Deceit permanently, like long-term individual who would be their envoy and their liaison to the Dominion. Now, after some deliberating, the party decided they wanted a Dericost. Now, I haven't really talked about this too much, but a Dericost is basically... Well, actually, I guess I have talked about this too much. Never mind, let's just ignore that. So they have a Dericost agent, a revenant specifically of the Dericost is stationed on board the ship now of the Maiden's Deceit. Now, the party asked to be able to name him. I said, sure. The name they suggested was Weyoun. So Weyoun is now a stationed member of the Maiden's Deceit. The They head back with the Maiden's Deceit to Fox Ridge. When they get there, they find what appears to be something like a battle being prepared. There are several Illuvian warships in a standoff against several Nevere and Sho warships, and a lot of lycanthropes on the ground who are actively fighting. Now, they walk into this kind of blind, but it turns out what's happening is, according to the Vasmora woman who's been contacting Snarg, there's this rebel group of Darakost who refuse to go along with this whole Dominion idea. They refuse to interact with lesser races. That is beneath them, and they will not lower themselves to interacting with such peasants. And so they have decided to militarily and viciously rebel. They're going to take those airships, the Illuvian ones, and leave. Now you might be like, well, how the hell do the Directorate have Illuvian ships anyways? Remember, the Directorate is a Darakost-run organization, and they know a lot about how airships work. They also know about the fatal defect in airship design. That's why the airships have not been fighting each other. But I bring this up because one of the things the Directorate has been doing is infiltrating the militaries of the world, and a lot of their efforts, and I've actually hinted at this several times, is that they're trying to infiltrate the remaining military-grade frigates that are not under their control and getting them under their control, because they actually believe the inclusion of military-grade frigates in the war will be a very bad thing, for obvious reasons. So the party deliberates for some time about how they're going to deal with this. This is also when my sister got very upset at me because apparently I had miscommunicated something to her sessions ago, and she'd been operating under false pretenses, so she just kind of was like, screw you, and she stabbed me in the chest and hurt a lot. Metaphorically, of course. So, the decision that they came up with in order to deal with this is they decided to translate over to the hull, on top of the hull of one of the Illuvian frigates, sneak their way in, and take them out. So they go in, they have their initial battle. It's like their first encounter with a bunch of lycanthropes right there at the hatch. And they're like, roar! They're having a bit of a time of it, because the lycanthropes, despite being relatively low level, have very strong gear. So this is actually kind of a challenging fight for them. And basically, each lycanthrope is a class cannon, effectively. So they're taking tons of damage, but falling over quickly. Then Zariel decides to use one of her strongest attacks, one of her special abilities, the things that she has due to her desolate nature for reasons that nobody's actually fully aware of why and how that works yet. Since she's basically one of our only player character desolate, so she's the only one who's actually explored this concept so far. I want you to imagine this pillar of flame that just kind of expands outward into a wall that doesn't stop at the hulls and keeps going until it's actually like jutting out of the airship. Now, the thing that made me amused by this is I asked them, where do you want to enter? There's several hatches, and they had decided to enter this one hatch, which is towards the fore of the ship, which also happens to be alongside several key critical engineering sections. So what happens is the engines give out, and the ship So as the airship is tumbling to the ground, Guido opens up an emergency portal, and literally in front of them, as the ship's tilting out and they're starting to fall through. The portal is opened here, and they go sliding through it along with some of the lycanthropes and the gear and whatnot, and they end up somewhere else. And then I had the unenviable task of rolling to see if the airship detonated, which, if it had, would not only wipe out every other airship here and literally thousands upon thousands of lycanthropes, but also would turn Fox Ridge into Fox Canyon. Oh, it would also have probably wiped out the Maiden's Deceit, too, and everyone on board, including Millie, a old, small, little, gnomish, elderly woman with her grandchildren. I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, the roll was unsuccessful. In other words, the ship didn't detonate, and I just, visible relief when that happened. So, because Guido at this point is still getting used to his particular teleportation powers, they end up in a weird place where all of the ground has a faint purplish hue to it, and is dry and cracked, and there's veins of violet energy that just kind of crisscross here and there, glowing up into the sky. Up above, they see this non-stop storm, which is all these clouds which are constantly moving very, very quickly, like super fast. Are all these clouds are just racing in a given direction above them, and it's always in the same direction. There's constant lightning and whatnot. It's quiet though. They don't hear a single sound from the above storm, and they encounter these tall creatures which look like women from the waist up, and long serpentine uh, energy tails from the waist down. I don't know how better to describe that. And they just kind of slither around on the ground. I'll go and give you the name now because of what the party did. I can't believe they did this. These are the Lamias. Now, the Lamias are an interesting situation for me as a GM. I'm going to go and tell you, the viewers, something that the players don't really know. The Lamias have been around for a long time, as in before year zero, as in the specific Lamias they're interacting with, not just the Lamias as a whole. So the one they're talking to has been around since before year zero, and therefore is basically an exposition box of goodiness. So I was trying to find a way to not give away the entirety of the plot now that they've encountered these people. I think I stumbled across a good solution. So it turns out they're fleeing for their lives as they get down. They're like, oh my god, we gotta go, and they automatically assume the party are fleeing as well. Turns out there's one of those giant creatures there. Now, the party's encountered these, I think, only one other time. In fact, that was just Zerial when she made a sojourn to this weird place through the spatial ley line in the spatial temple. When she entered the Black Sun, or the Violet Star, excuse me, she saw this massive creature of doom, and they've taken to calling them giant reed sharks, a natural byproduct of the reed shark growth. And so they're like, we need to escape. And so there's another one of those things here, except this one is metallic. It's got long shafts of iron and steel and copper and bronze and all sorts of other metals throughout its construction. It does, and again, it looks like it's just a massive giant reed shark, and hunched forward on its forelegs and its hind legs, and it's just coming after them. The Lamias happen to be illusionary masters, so they have this illusion where there's this pit they can fall into. It actually looks like ground. So like, quick, get in here, get in here. And the party's like, oh god, we gotta get the hell out of here. They get a little bit of exposition. They do learn it. So Zerial can speak their language. The Lamias cannot speak any of their languages, though. Now, the funny thing is, Snarg, I didn't intend this, but Snarg was actually pretty clever. He cast Analyze on one of the Lamias and decided the thing he would learn from them for 10 minutes or however long it is their language. So Snarg and Zerial could both speak their language and understand it. Guido, of course, could not, but they translated back and forth. And so they were interacting with them, and it turns out, again, they do learn that they've been around since before year zero. They do learn a few little tidbits, but nothing really significant, because they're kind of fleeing for their life, because this creature is still chasing them. They do learn that they've been under attack by this thing for several months at this point in time, along with other settlements in the area, which apparently have also been under attack. They also discover that the Lamias have a unique form of portal teleporting. They basically have to activate illusory runes, which then interact with pre-existing magical constructs, which enable them to teleport between, effectively, waygates. You know, it's specifically this spot to this spot, so you have to physically construct this and physically construct this, and then you have to have the illusionary magic to activate it, and then you have a gateway, basically, between the two. One of the Lamias ends up betraying the group to the creature. They don't actually find out why. So they're teleported right back in front of the thing. And that's when Guido decides to open another portal to get the hell out of Dodge. And hang on. Is that when that happened? Yes, okay. I'm just making sure. I want to make sure I'm getting the order of events right. Sorry. I'm checking I have notes. So they get the hell out of Dodge. They take the Lamias with them. I didn't intend for that. At no point in time did it occur to me they would take the Lamias with them. So now there are several Lamias, like about 12 of them, here in the, in the normal realm or whatever. And, of course, they can only talk to Zerial and occasionally Snarg if he burns an analyze on them. They learn that they literally eat spatial energy. Like, that's their consumption, that's their food in order to function. And they also learn that they are innate weavers, as in they can just start weaving. Well, it's not weaver. I'm sorry, I'm actually saying that wrong. They are innate shapers, This is something that I haven't really discussed that much because it's basically super rare and it almost never actually has happened in the campaign to date. A weaver is someone who imbues an existing item with magic to do a function, right? You know, you can make a pen that refills its ink. Well, actually, you can't do that. You can make a chunk of wood that then puts out ink at the end. That's closer to what you could actually do as with weaving. You know, it's virtually all of the society functions on weaving, right? Shaping is taking existing matter and doing exactly what it sounds like, shaping into a new shape, changing it around. That's what the Lamias can do, and they start shaping some of the airship into a few different things while they're there, and then they end up being taken to the spatial temple where they can, have food and not die. That's actually the last we've seen of the Lamias to date, but moving along. When they get back, the general of the local directorate forces, now the Dominion forces, says, I want to have a meeting with you. And he's naturally pissed because now this is funny. He doesn't even care about the hundreds of lycanthropes who died on the ship and when the ship crashed onto them. That doesn't even cross his mind. But the fact that the airship was destroyed is a huge deal to him. And he's like, why did our allies destroy one of our airships? Why did you do that? Why did one of our allies kill Daracost? Because there were Daracost on that ship too. Why did one of our allies threaten all of us by nearly detonating an airship in our midst? So he is basically threatening them. He demands answers. Now, from the GM's perspective, I'll go ahead and tell you this general had no intention to actually follow through on these threats unless they were actually the bad guys. Now, Snarg, in character, takes huge exception to this. He adamantly is like, you do not point swords at your allies. This is unforgivable. So Snarg basically says, all right, we're out. We're quitting the Dominion. We're not going to be part of your organization anymore. And Zariel and Guido are like, okay, because Guido wants to stay with the Dominion for his trade reasons, and Zariel wants to stay with the Dominion for her own ends. So they're both like, and we have a little bit of an issue here. Now, the funny thing is, Snarg has this brilliant idea. He contacts the Vasmora agent, and he says, I want information on this general. I want his weaknesses and whatnot, blah, blah. And so he gets a dossier back from her. And this is also when they learn that the dossiers are not physical objects, that they're not being teleported onto the ship or whatever. They're just being beamed into their brains directly. So literally, he's holding a piece of paper, but what's physically happening in real life is he's doing exactly what I'm doing right now. There's nothing in his hands. He's not actually holding anything. So a lot of interactions happen here, and the general... So what Snarg decides to do is he decides to use some of the traps, the geomancy traps that are in Fox Ridge, and his own geomancy powers to basically collapse the tunnel the general's in, crushing and killing him. At least that was the intent. Now, Guido happened to be nearby, so Guido rushes forward, puts a portal down on the ground, and they all tumble into it. So the general, his lycanthrope bodyguards, and Guido himself all tumble through the portal, surviving the incident. Teresio, I actually wrote down his name, General Teresio. He is a revenant as well, by the way. So, Guido, he doesn't... he has some adventures, but I'm not going to discuss it. Basically, it's a lot of really awesome role-playing. Guido basically gets to the point where he feels like he agrees with the overall directorate mindset. Or, excuse me, the overall Daracost mindset, which means he overall agrees with the Dominion mindset at this point. And now he wants to work with them anymore. He actually solidifies some of those trade contracts I mentioned earlier. And when he finally gains the ability to teleport back out of the place he ended up in, which I'm not even going to discuss because it's not really that relevant, he teleports back to Yerak, drops him off, and then is going to head to Fox Ridge. Now, during this, Guido finally gets to the point where he can finally teleport at will and actually end up where he's intending to go. There is a side effect, though, which the players are aware of, so I'm going to tell you aware of it. Basically, his new teleport is not actually a standard Desolate teleport. It functions the same way, except it ricochets through this massive pulsing black star, which Guido has seen several times, at every time he's headed up in whatever the other place is. And so he will ricochet through that black star. This does nothing to Guido. Anyone who goes with him has to do a save. A will save, basically. It's actually a wisdom save at this point, because we got rid of saves. But he has to do a save in order to see what happens as a result of going through that ricochet. Or slingshot, actually. Well, not slingshot. Yeah, whatever. Point being, Meanwhile, Zerial and Snarg have been like, okay, we need to go back to the spatial plane. That's obviously where Guido went. So we're just gonna teleport down there. So they teleport down there, and they end up on a strange moving mountain. And they're like, what the hell? Turns out this mountain is a creature, which they flee from in terror. There's also another one of those massive reed sharks on the mountain, which as soon as they realize that, they just try to get the hell out of Dodge as fast as they can. Now the funny thing is, Zerial initially tries to teleport back down to the spatial place so she can get, because that's where she was trying to go to begin with. That just ends up teleporting them like 500 feet further down the mountain, still on the mountain, and they end up like literally falling off this mountain. And as they're falling, they see it finally start to get up, and they start to see, the fact that it has eyes, giant gaping holes of flame jutting out of the mountainside as it turns around and starts to move towards them. And then they get the hell out of Dodge. What follows is an entire session of the players of the party just sitting down discussing politics. I don't really have much to summarize there for you guys. It's a good session. It's like the session just previous to this one last week, so you should watch it if you haven't. But it's basically them deciding, okay, we are the party, right? We are player characters. We have lots of personal power, but basically no political power. We don't really have a lot of infrastructure. We don't really have a lot of backing. We don't really have a lot of resources. We need to decide who we are going to join or form, and so they sit down and hash out all their options with the Vasmora group, with the Dominion, with the show, with the Alluvians, with the Exchange, with the Osteth. They go down the whole list of every group that they know that exists up to this point, and there are more groups obviously than they know it exist. But they just go down the list, and they're like, okay, we need to figure out who we're working with, when we're working with, why we're working with, all that good stuff. And they decide they're going to go ahead and maintain ties with the Dominion for now. They're going to try to smooth things over with the Dominion. The Dominion, for their part, thinks the whole cave-in was actually an accident. In fact, the lycanthropes were in a period of deep shame that they made the cavern so poorly that it collapsed on one of the Derricos. That's just a horrible thing for the lycanthropes. So they're literally like not even talking to people for the most part. And then they're going to work from there. One of the ideas that they toss out, and this is funny because of what I told you at the beginning of this video, is they've decided maybe we should go reach out to the Tomb Rock. Yeah. Anyways, that gets you caught up for now. I hope you've enjoyed. See you next time, guys.